for the person struggling, it's hard, man. You just got to let your guard down a little bit. It doesn't mean that you have to let it all the way down and let anyone walk through, but there are people that'll come into your life that are definitely lights, and you're going to have to let them in. And that means that in some way you're going to have to change. And I think even now, we kept hearing in the very beginning of COVID that, get back to normal. Well, for me, normal was never going to happen again.
Welcome to St. Louis in Tune, where we look to live a more informed life. Our weekly podcast rounds out the edges of unsettled questions in current and historic events, the arts, history, and justice, to name a few. We are connecting the gateway city to our country's cultural fabric and lives. The show is co-hosted by Arnold Stricker and Mark Langston. I'd like to introduce Chris Lee. He's the owner of Salt and Light Leather. And Chris has a very unusual story, and I'm going to let him tell it, but he's been through a lot. He's a very unique guy. Matter of fact, Mike Emerson says hi, Chris. I texted him this morning.
Hey, Mike.
To get him to listen in on the show. Matter of fact, a big shout-out to Lee Moss, former resident of Webster Groves, who's now down in Texas. Mm-hmm. And Chris has been through a great deal, and Chris he's still a chef, but he creates things in a different way now. He doesn't create food as much as he creates Leatherworks. Chris, welcome to St. Louis in Tune.
Thank you. Well, good morning.
Well, tell us a little bit about your entry into the culinary world first and how that began. And I know you're a St. Louis native. And what was the drive behind being a chef?
I always say my aunt Michelle used to babysit my sister and I, and she married into an Italian family, and we would go over to their house over in Edmondson, and I remember her father-in-law cooking pizzas, and just being so happy. He made the dough, he made the sauce, and as a bunch of kids who were running around and acting crazy, we all had an opportunity to make our own pizza for lunch, and I just fell in love with it. Oh, yeah. And it kind of from that day, at like maybe 7, 8 years old, I'd always wanted to be a chef. So my first official job was at Ponderosa as a dishwasher, and I moved my way up to the ranks of McDonald's cook, and eventually landed with a then local chain, Calico's, as a dishwasher. Oh, yeah. Left for the Navy, came back, went back to working for the Calico's name, and there was a chef there that brought me into fine dining, and I did fine dining for, I guess, 15 years. That's all I'd done, and had a setback after we opened our own restaurant, my parents and I, Melange, which was in the West End. I had to have a hip transplant.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
Was set back for about a year. Kind of broke back into the cooking scene. The cooking scene is one of those things where you're either on top of it or you're behind it. It's just like being in the weeds. If you're on the line, you're either in front of it or you're behind. So I got back on my feet literally. Ended up opening up several restaurants here in St. Louis: Cafe Ventana, Melange, Hendrick's Barbecue, Chewy's, the second incantation when it was in Grand Center, and was slated to open a few more restaurants when I left that company. And went to the casino, River City Casino, opened the banquet facility, and decided, you know what, I'm pretty good at this. I'm going to open my own gig, and that was Chef's Table 5 years ago now. And 4 years ago, I was in a pretty bad accident. So now I've made the transition, partly because of my physical ability, I do leather work, and I'm I'm actually in seminary now.
Okay, so we're going to kind of dissect that a little.
There.
Yeah, there is a lot there, and you know what?
A lot there.
I appreciate you worked your way up. Washing dishes first. You have to really understand all of the intricacies and the jobs at a restaurant to really appreciate what happens and how things work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So at Chef's Table, let's talk about that. That was down on Cherokee Street. What kind of restaurant was that?
We did catering, mostly corporate catering. We did a lot of we are branching more into, I would say, like personal chef type catering. That's what it started originally. We did a lot of gluten-free, low glycemic, healthy food for delivery. And eventually, through that, we worked our way up into some of the bigger companies in St. Louis. And we were pretty much in transition, or not necessarily transition. We were gearing up to start doing more and more catering-type functions that particular year.
Now, I don't know you well enough to make this statement, but I know you well enough to make this statement, if that makes sense. That
Sure.
you are not the kind of guy that will take things lying down. Even though things may have debilitated you a little bit, you're pressing on to other kinds of things. Tell us a little bit about what dramatically changed your career in the culinary arts.
I would start with my hip transplant. Early in my career, we learned, all of us that were in that type of work then, were taught you work really hard and you party even harder. Most of us did not drink on the line, and maybe some did, I don't know. But after work, it was every night was a party. And from a life of that, I kind of drank away my hip. So that first year, after coming home from the hospital and having to relearn how to walk, I also got sober. I've been sober now for 15 years. And that humbled me dramatically. I realized that there is a definite end to how much physical activity I can do in a given day, that everyone that surrounds me is just as important as I am. And, that was it, that there has to be there has to be a give and take with any sort of job. In 2012, what year, 2010? 2016, I'm in a ministry, the Christian Crusaders. It's a motorcycle club that evangelizes to the hardcore biker, and as well as other people, but that's our primary focus. We were three of us were at a local bar, just hanging out, praying for people. We weren't drinking. We were actually just kind of being conspicuous. And that night, it started to rain. And the short story is we were on the southbound 141 by Centurion and Hawkins, and a lady got on 141 the wrong direction going north on the southbound road and collided with two of us. She killed my friend instantly, and myself. It was a 70-mile-per-hour impact on a motorcycle. I was literally crushed from head to toe. So I have shattered my arm, my leg, had a collapsed lung, broke my sternum, broke my clavicle. I got a pretty big gash on my head, and effectively was put in a hospital bed for a full year before I could even really get up and start moving around.
Wow.
So when that happened, there was some definite, what do I do? How do I move through this? And the decision was made in March to just shut down Chef's Table. I had some wonderful people that were keeping it afloat while I couldn't be there, but it was becoming a little too hard for me to manage from a hospital bed. So my dad and I made the decision to shut it down.
And how did you work your way into making leather goods? Because that seems to be there's creativity there in both of those things, but
yeah,
you got a story from Boy Scouts, don't you?
I do too.
Partly. I always thought it was kind of cool. I think I might have made a coaster or two at Boy Scouts. I learned the first go around with the hospital stay that you cannot sit for any, television is no way to recover. You have to do something with your hands and your head because you're going to go crazy. And depression is always right around the corner when you're taking pain pills and you can't do anything. You're literally trapped inside your own body. A friend of mine stopped by the hospital and had asked for my chap leather. Thankfully, I had chaps on that night, which are heavy leather, basically pants, which protected my leg in such a way that I didn't lose my leg. It was crushed. And I said, what do you need my leather for? And he said, well, I'm going to make you a knife, and I need the leather for a sheath. And I said, what do you know about leather work and knife work? And he goes, nothing. I'm going to YouTube it. So I thought, I got to thinking, well, what? I have plenty of this leather. Let me YouTube this. So I YouTubed it, and the movements, the mechanics, physical mechanics of leather work are pretty rudimentary in that they're up and down, back and forth, and side to side. There's no twisting of your arm, which I could not do. A maul is only about a pound, so that kind of helps strengthen my arm. So I started doing leather work as part of my rehabilitation. And once I got into it, I was like, man, I'm not that bad at it, and I enjoy it. So it's kind of grown from rehabilitation to, I won't say it's a full-time job right now, but it's definitely, I make income on it, and I think I'm pretty good at it. I make holsters, purses. I like making purses, which is funny. If you met me, you would think that people would hold their purses a little closer. But in fact, I make some. I've fixed Coach bags and a few other things, and I love it. It's a lot of fun, and it is unique that on one hand I could probably cook everything inside the animal, and now I can probably make you something on the outside of the animal.
There you go. There you go. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
So, designing new things, making new things. Do you repair Leatherworks like belts? And I think you mentioned you did repair purses and things like that.
I do. I've repaired purses. A gentleman dropped off an old aviator jacket. I sewed that all back together for him. Somebody had dropped me off a rocking chair that was 3 generations old. So it was made, I think, in like the 1800s. The leather was dry rotted, and I duplicated the back. There were 2 big griffins. I duplicated the griffins and put a new pan in the bottom of the seat. Like, just basically rebuilt the entire chair for this guy. And that was probably one of my favorite projects, actually.
Huh. So how long does it take? Go ahead.
I've done all kinds of fun stuff as far as that's concerned, repair work.
How long does it take to make a basic small purse? Like, you have to pick the leather out and pick the tooling out that you're interested in, and I don't know if you have to tan it or anything like that, or do any kind of dyeing or all those kinds of issues. I do. Not many people tool anymore. It is time consuming. There's a lot of work. Without ever knowing this, St. Louis has one of the oldest vegetable tanneries in the country, if not the world, and some of the best leather you can get. That's
for
correct.
Saddle making and tooling, Herman Oak.
Right.
So I use their product. A purse from start to finish with layout, tooling. I hand dye all mine. I've learned this technique where it almost looks like airbrushing, but it's all hand painted. It'll take about anywhere from 10 to 20 hours to make a purse.
Interesting.
And that's with straps, every pockets and all that stuff inside of it. It's pretty time consuming.
Years ago, there was a guy in Euclid, the Leather Loft, I think is what it was called, and I had him make a briefcase for me, a handmade leather briefcase. And I still, to this day, and that was probably 35 or 40 years ago, I still have the briefcase and use it. It's amazing the durability of it, the craftsmanship, and how personal it can become. I just still love the briefcase that guy made for me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It is interesting once you start getting into it. You're handling something that I think lives with you. It would be a way to put it. Like it's something, if it's made well, you'll have it forever. I've gotten stuff. Well, like that rocking chair was a 100 years old. Yeah. I've gotten purses from great grandmas that I've repaired, and it's just a matter of taking them apart and restitching them and cleaning the leather up, and they're good as new. It's pretty amazing.
Real personal item, leather goods like that.
Right.
Very, very personal. Yeah.
So if people were going to buy some of your leather goods, where would they find it?
Right now, I'm just on Facebook. I do custom work primarily, so you just reach out to me on Salt and Light Leather on Facebook, or on my page, Christopher Lee. I had a site. I'm going to redo the page this coming year and have a landing page for people to contact me from as well. which will be Salt and Light Leather. I have the name already put aside on, was it GoDaddy? With school, I kind of just let that one kind of slide for a minute.
Now, have you talked to a lot of different leather guys or leather gals in the area as they are makers of many things?
You know, some. I have a friend, Hawk, that lives southern Missouri. We met actually at Atlas. They make tactical gear over in Fenton. He and I wanted to learn how to use the sewing machines, high-speed machines for Leatherworks, so I took a job at Atlas, and he worked there, and we became friends. He does some amazing sheaths and stuff like that. There's also a leather guild here in St. Louis, which I'm a part of. COVID has kind of stymied all that, though. We haven't been able to meet. But it's interesting. There's a pretty large group of people here in St. Louis that do leather work. Cottage industry type people. And once you start doing it, everyone kind of meets at Tandy Leather on Tesson Ferry.
Oh, yeah.
And there I put my card up and I get business off of that. And I actually get to meet a lot of people through Tandy as well. So one of the neatest things about leather work, which is a little different than kitchen work, is if you meet a guy that's been doing this for 50 years, he'll be happy to show you everything. Whereas a kitchen-type person, they're going to hold those recipes a little closer, you know. They'll give you a recipe, but they won't give you their recipe.
That's right. They'll leave a couple ingredients out.
Yeah. And that's how I was taught. Yeah, you give them everything, but like how much salt to add to it or something like that.
So every year, we used to, I guess this year we didn't, we go to our Boy Scout camp. And the first year scouts always have to do leatherworking. And my kids still have, and I think I even have something left over, one of the first merit badges is leatherworking. And they make moccasins. They make, what else do they make? They make wallets.
Coin purses.
Coin purses, that's right. So the little scouts are always doing that, and it's amazing some of the things that the kids can make. I think it's fascinating to me anyway. But so it's one of the very first.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So have you talked to some of the chefs in town to see if they need any leather goods for their restaurants or their personal attire?
Some. I've made a few aprons for people. I made all of the menu covers for Mary Jane's Burgers down in St. Genevieve. Those are buffalo hide with an embossing on the front of them. I did that a few years ago. I do have a machine now, and I'll turn out my first knife bag in less than a month. It should be done by Christmas, and I'll post that up on Facebook.
Cool.
So I am going to start making. I do journal covers, and the idea is I'm going to start making for young chefs. They should have a notebook somewhere on their person, and I want us to start making small notebook covers with pigs or cows or wee chef or something on there that gets the personal items that they'll have for the rest of their lives.
Whatever kind of meat they like there,
right?
Whether it's or if they like the bird, or maybe they're completely vegan or something.
Right. And the older the leather,
some recipes. Yeah.
And the older that leather gets, the better it is. So if you have one of those books and you're a chef,
it's more supple and
love that.
They patina over beautifully.
Yeah. So before we get into another deeper issue here, what do you put on leather? What do you recommend to put on leather to keep it treated? And how often should that be done?
At Chuck's Boots, there's a product called Bic, B-I-C-K. There's Bic 1, which is a little aggressive. You probably won't need it, but Bic 4 is a cleaner and a conditioner. And saddle soap, believe it or not, saddle soap's awesome for cleaning stuff up and conditioning. But both of which maybe once or twice a year, depending on the application. If it's something that's outside all the time and gets wet a lot, you definitely want to do it more often than not. But, a purse or something like that, a little Bic 4, rub it in, and it won't discolor your leather. It'll clean it up real nice, and it'll condition it. That usually, if I do any repair work for you, I'll recondition all the leather myself. But I think a little tube or bottle of Vic 4 at Chuck's is like $5-6. It's not very expensive.
So if you get a scratch on your leather belt or your leather purse, and it kind of takes that top leather portion off the color, is there any way to repair that?
Yes and no. It's a little more involved. One of the things that you can use a little shoe polish if you can match the color. I think that's one of the things where I'd have to see in person to know really if I could repair it or not.
Water stains are my nemesis with leather. I get those water stains. It's always tough to get those off.
Yeah. I think vinegar. You had mentioned the guy on Euclid. That's Steve. He owns Soul Survivor on, I guess that's Manchester. There, he's in Maplewood. He's in a big store on the right there on Maplewood, and he's been doing it for 30, 40 years. So if it had something like that, water stains or things that are hard to lift out, he's one guy. Or there's a place on the Rock Road, Ram. I believe it's Ram that's been there
forever,
as long as I can remember. Right. Yeah, in St. John, and they're I think they are the go-to people for cleaning leather and taking care of it.
Whether it's a touch with the creative culinary arts or a touch with Leatherworks, you seem to be doing that. So what's the touch with going to Covenant Theological Seminary?
Well, I got to think, I don't have a formal education in the sense of college. I've done some college courses. I can I've butchered some sauce and things like that. But as far as a diploma from college, I don't have one. And I'm 48 now, and I got to thinking, I'm going to need to shift my career, and I don't have a lifetime to relearn something, so I think college may be the best way to go. So while I was while I was sewing tactical gear at Atlas, I decided, I think I've got cousins that are mechanics, and one of my cousins, Chris, does hot rods and stuff like that. I'm like, there's a shortage of upholsterers. Maybe I can do that. And so I applied for an upholstery school in New Jersey, and that fell through. So basically, I was trying to figure out what to do with my life after the accident. Mm-hmm. And when I was opening restaurants, one thing that I loved more than I loved cooking was working with the staff. I wouldn't say I was a counselor per se, but when you have a staff of a few hundred people and they're having some hard times, and the end goal is not to get rid of them or find someone else. At least not for me. It's to help them walk them through whatever they're going through. Mm-hmm. And I had reached out to a friend that I've known for 30 years that actually helped get me into fine dining, and I said, "Hey, man, I think I'm going to go to Brooks College to get a counselor's degree." And he said, "No, man, don't go there. Come to Covenant." And so I'm on a master's program without a formal college degree. So I had to take the MATS test, mm-hmm. Which was weird. I took the test, and I know this is all God because I think I got like a 67. The average is 60. So I passed with more than enough. The guy from Covenant called and said, "Hey, man, you've got less than a week to get in. What are you doing?" And I said, I haven't gotten my results back. So I told him what my preliminary score was, and he said, "Well, that's high enough." And I'll tell you what, a week later, with little or no influence from myself, when you're a chef, you start to meet all kinds of people, and I am one of those guys like, hey, I've got a guy for everything. And I decided in a moment I'm not going to touch it. If this is where I'm supposed to be, then God's going to make a way. And I'm now in my third semester at seminary. I had started with a counseling degree and decided that I don't know if I'd make a very good long-term counselor. So I shifted to a master in divinity, and I'm learning ancient Greek, and apologetics is the track that I'm on, which is defending the faith in such a way that, it's a hard one to define sometimes, apologetics, but essentially my end is defending the faith in such a way that makes sense that's not. I can't think of the word.
That doesn't push people, but makes them think.
Yes, I was thinking abusive. It's not. That's a terrible word for that. Just think, it's not something where I'm trying to control the situation or push something on you. It's more of a you make the decision. I'm going to help you make the decision on your own, kind of thing.
Yeah, Ravi Zacharias, the late Ravi Zacharias, was a great apologetics minister of the gospel.
Yeah.
And I admired him. I heard him speak live a couple times, and just a very brilliant man, and had a degree in philosophy, I believe, and then went to seminary and was able to talk to, not beat people over the head, and help them think about things that are important, and as it relates to life and the afterlife and Jesus and religions around the world and things like that. So I have a question. As you were talking, who walked you through when you were in the hospital? You mentioned that, like, when you worked with staff and they were having issues, that you would help them walk through things. Who walked you through what you were going through when you were in the hospital?
Initially, no one. The first go-around, it was when I was basically told I can't drink again. I've got a vascular necrosis, so if I drink, I lose basically joints. So I went to AA, as a matter of fact, and I met a sponsor, and he helped me walk me through all of this. I still talk to him today, and it's not, hey, I'm going to drink. It's more like, is this a good decision? I think that people need someone in their lives to kind of bounce ideas off of, and now there's like a whole, I won't call them a team, but there's a community of people that when I'm stuck on something, I reach out. As a chef, you start to get after a while that you're on an island. You can't talk to anyone else because they're going to steal your ideas, or you're always looking for an in as a chef. And I've discovered in life that real life doesn't operate like that. You can't walk through life with a distrust of everyone, and somewhere along the line, you're going to have to open up to somebody, or you're just going to go crazy. So,
was that something that, I'm kind of getting personal now, was that something that you grew up with, where you had those kinds of conversations in family, or there was an openness? I know from my own end, I would say the answer to that would be no. And it caused me personally to be a little more reserved and not as open as I probably could have been. What about you?
Right. I would agree. My family, on one side, my grandfather was full Chinese. On the other side, mostly predominantly Luxembourg and French. There's a lot of German heritage in my family. And I say all of that because as immigrants, you kind of stick to your own. And I think a lot of times when we had to deal with anything then, and I've really kind of figured out that it's enlarged because of depression, you take care of yourself. If you need something, you fix it. If there's something wrong, you fix it. Whenever there is a problem, you need to figure it out on your own. Not necessarily, let's see who we can get involved, because then you're admitting some sort of weakness. And I think that's been rather difficult over my lifetime to untangle from that type of mentality.
Admitting weakness is really difficult.
Yeah.
And seeking assistance for weakness is even more difficult.
Yeah. This second go-around was just mind-numbing how difficult it was. I mean, Chef's Table was doing well. We were paying bills, and, we were operating a business, and my wife was getting back on her feet from making a transition from one thing to another. And then to have that just completely wiped off the table was terrifying. And we discovered that, it's okay to be weak. It's okay to ask for help. And more often than not, I think that you should ask for help. I think it creates a little community in such a way that it's stronger, and you're tied in with a group of people. You're no longer a meteoroid floating through space. You're kind of in lockstep with a community from that point.
That's a good way to put that.
Really?
Yeah.
So when you're done at Covenant, and I know you want to, work with individuals as it relates to defense of the faith. Is that with youth? Is that with young adults? Is that with older adults, middle-aged people, anybody? Do you have a specific kind of group in mind that you're thinking about?
I keep thinking about that. I don't know I don't know a direct answer to that question. I would like to travel. I like speaking to people, and I love writing. It's something I discovered. I've known I've always enjoyed, but now that I'm in a situation where I have to write all the time, something that I really enjoy. And God keeps putting men in my life. People like Mike Emerson and Rick at Grace Meeting 3, and other men that I just meet or I've known, and we have these conversations that it's not exclusively about Jesus or religion. It's just more about how do you live a life in this environment as a man. There seems to be a huge shift, and I think everyone's trying to figure out where they belong in things, and I think that will never change. But to come alongside someone much like my sponsor came alongside me and said, no, you're kind of on the right path, but let me help you get all the way on the right path, in the middle of the road, so to speak, as opposed to walking in the gutters.
So let's kind of
I hope that answers your question.
It does, and let's transition this to, because it's piggybacks off of right what you said. What do you say to somebody else who's going through the same situation that you have gone through, whether they've been in a severe accident, whether they've been dealing with alcoholism, whether it's maybe a family member who's got somebody in that situation, somebody's just been hit in a horrible automobile accident and they're laid up in the hospital. What advice do you offer the individual who's the recipient of those things, who's going through those things, and what advice do you offer to family members of those individuals?
I think for the person struggling, it's hard, man. You just got to let your guard down a little bit. It doesn't mean that you have to let it all the way down and let anyone walk through, but there are people that'll come into your life that are definitely lights, and you're going to have to let them in, and that means that in some way you're going to have to change. And I think even now, we kept hearing in the very beginning of COVID that, get back to normal. Well, for me, normal was never going to happen again. My lawyer said, you're never going to be made whole again, and there has to be a level of acceptance there. So where do we go with that? And I think that, one, you have to have some level of acceptance that it's never going to be the same again. And the unique thing about being a human being is we get to decide after that our realities. Where do you want to go? Do you want to, if you continue on the same path that you're on, as an alcoholic or someone that uses chemicals to make their life better, you have to look at that. Is it really truly making my life better? And for the individual that is lost, my answer has been faith. And I think that I don't know any other way to put this, but then there has been something consistent in my life since I've decided to follow after it that has been unwavering. And I cannot explain it, and the only way I can explain it is it's God. And that unwavering faith and just knowing that something or somewhere something will take care of me has been, I think, at the end of the day, what I hold on to every morning I get up. It doesn't mean that my life magically became easier. It's not a country record played backwards or anything like that. I've lost a livelihood. I've lost a business. I lost a friend. I lost a lot of things. But on the other side of that, I've gained so much more than I've lost just because I've been open to it. I hope that makes sense.
Sure. It's a lot of it's perspective, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it is. It is.
It's whether the glass is half full or half empty, and how you view yourself at that point of time when you're looking at that glass. Mm-hmm. And I think our world
go ahead.
No, I think our world has a tendency to make it look like we're always half empty.
Yeah, and I think that there is something there that says, well, maybe you're not good enough, or there's something in the back of your head that will always say, what if, or maybe, or these things, and if I've learned anything, you just have to ignore it. When I first got sober, I was like, all of these decisions I make are all kind of similar. What if I did the exact opposite of what I do? And I'll be darned if it was pretty crazy. I've discovered, in that moment that maybe Chris's thinking wasn't the best. Let's try the exact opposite. And some pretty cool things happened in my life, I could probably write a book of all the crazy opportunities I've had since those moments of making that decision. Like, well, Chris wasn't always right, so let's try something different, And I think that comes from perspective, it comes from an openness, and it comes from a willingness to make those decisions and stick to them, And unfortunately, that's going to mean a lot of courage. But some of that stuff, there's a lot of white knuckle moments in my life for sure.
There are, and Mark, this, just being able to talk to Chris was something that there was this. I saw this story, and was reading about his story, and was like, his story needs to be told more, and because the information I was reading was actually several years old, and was able to make contact with him and schedule this interview, and I really greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to us here, Chris.
What a great journey that Chris has had, from riding a motorcycle. And what an accident! I can't imagine having an accident on a motorcycle. I mean, it's just beyond my I just can't imagine it. And then what Chris has gone through, I think there is definitely divine intervention here, Chris. Yes. And I applaud you for being open to the Lord's direction.
Yeah.
I really believe that happens to us, that we are guided if we just listen. And it's hard to get people to listen, and that's so. Kudos to you, brother.
Thank you.
We've been talking to Christopher Lee. He is an all kind of wonderful guy. Right now he works on leather, Salt and Light Leather. And folks, hey, if you want to get some leather goods, go to his website, or not his website, go to his Facebook page, right. Salt and Light Leather, Salt and Light Leather, or you can go to his personal page, Christopher M. Lee. And maybe you can get something for the upcoming Hanukkah or Christmas celebrations. And leather lasts a long time. Yep. He may even, throw in a little recipe there. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
There'll be a 5x6 card on the inside of how to make Twinkies or something.
There you go.
We want that secret recipe, Chris. Come on, give it up.
Chris, thanks very much for being on St. Louis in Tune. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you listening to this episode of St. Louis in Tune. Take time to look at the show notes on the website for everything that was mentioned on this episode. St. Louis in Tune is produced in cooperation with KWRH 92.9 FM and Motif Media Group. For St. Louis in Tune, I'm Arnold Stricker.